All right, this is chapter 1 of communication skill, and communication skill is for ATSWA students. So the topic for chapter 1 is general introduction to communication. That's what we're dealing with in chapter 1, general introduction to communication. Okay, and our learning objective, what is being expected of us after completing this chapter 1, is that we should be able to define communication. That's number 1. We should be able to define communication. Number 2, to explain the roles of communication. And I think there's a third one. We should be able to define human communication. Which is, I think, is the third one. So this video is for section 1.1 and section 2, 1.2, which is introduction and definition and meaning of communication. So that's what we're going to discuss in this video. So let's start with the introduction. Communication has been variously defined by different communication experts. So people who have understanding, who have in-depth knowledge of communication, has defined it in so many ways. But in all of these, their definition, communication can simply be described as the interchange of information between or among two or more persons. So the interchange of information between two or among more between or amongst two or more persons is what we call communication, interchange of information. So what we are doing right now between you and I is what we call communication. There's an interchange of information, all right, and that is communication. Now, communication is not limited to the art of speaking or writing. That's another point. This is like point 1, okay? Why communication is not limited to the art of speaking or writing is point 2. All right? So, because as I'm speaking, you are listening, you are writing, you are reading, all of these are part of communication, but they are not all of communication. Okay, and that's why we say that communication is not limited to the art of speaking or writing. It also covers body language. So you giving a non-verbal cue is part of communication. So when they ask you a question and you just nod your head, it means it's communication. It's a feedback. It's communication. Okay, and that's why communication is not limited to what? To speaking or writing, reading or writing or listening. So personal manners are also part of it. Also part of communication. We call all of this non-verbal cues because the way you say please sometimes could mean different things. Excuse me please. That excuse me please, with the tone, with the expression, with the manner, you understand what I'm trying to say. Are you getting my point? It's not as if I'm sober or vulnerable, but what if I say, please excuse me, please, that same words used in different contexts, and that's why words alone does not words alone is not the only thing categorized as what or known for communication. So the personal manners and the ways these are exhibited in style and effect. So in this chapter, we would introduce you to the basic concept of communication and prepare you for the key ideas you're likely to meet in subsequent chapters. Okay, so that's what the chapter 1 is all about. Now, There's section 1.2 and section 1.3, and that is examines of role of communication, define and explain the terms communication. So the second part of this video is definition and meaning of communication. Definition and meaning of communication. Definition and meaning of communication. We understand what communication is, okay? I know that for sure because we understand what communication is. But we want to know the definition of communication and meaning of communication, okay? So the word communication is derived from the Latin word communis. So there is the word communication, which is an English word, is derived from the Latin word communis. And this communis means common. And to be truthful to you, if there is no common understanding or common ground, there is no communication. Okay, if you speak Chinese to me and I don't understand Chinese, no matter how intentional, no matter how important, no matter how serious whatsoever you're saying is, because there's no common ground for basis of understanding, there is no communication. That is what this particular aspect is telling us, that communication is it's important. So individuals involved in communication by this definition attempt to ensure a common basis for understanding the message that is communicated between or among them, in which is part of the thing I said earlier. So according to the American Society of Training Directors, a good communication is the interchange of thoughts or information to bring about mutual understanding and confidence or good human relations. So, just like what I said earlier, communication is about, mutual understanding, interchange of thought or information, and the benefit of it is, for confidence, for good human relations, and entertainment, anything that communication, the rules of communication, in which is part of the things that we'll discuss in the next video. So Mary Ellen Goofy defines communication as the transmission of information and the meaning from one individual or group to another. You understand my point? The transmission of information and meaning from one individual or group to another. So communication, therefore, is anything that can make a message more meaningful. Communication is anything that can make a message more meaningful to the one being communicated with. Anything that can make a message more meaningful to the one being communicated with. That's communication. Okay, so communication is a two-way process. Okay, that's another point that you need to know. Communication is a two-way process. Communication is a two-way process. Two-way. And when we say two-way process, we are saying that for there to be a sender of information, there is what? A receiver of information. There is a receiver of information. And this receiver sends what we call feedback. The receiver sends what we call feedback. Okay, so it's not complete without the feedback, which is what the receiver sends. So feedback ensures that communication is more effective because it confirms received and adequate understanding of the intended message. Okay, it confirms receipt. It confirms that I understand what you sent to me. You understand my point? An adequate understanding of the intended message. If it is an action, if it is, silence. Some feedback is just silence. All right, some feedback is just silence. But even that silence, to the one that is sending the message, to the one that is, that is the sender, he understands that, okay, this is what I'm expected to get from what I'm saying. If you should ask me that what is the feedback of what I'm doing currently, that is the information I'm sending, the feedback is that I want you to come to the comment section after you've written your examination and tell me, oh, this question came out and I answered it correctly. I understand what you're saying. You ask me question if you are not sure or you are not clear at some point. These are the feedback that you as the receiver of the information is going to, give to me, and that is what is going to complete the communication. All right. So in a nutshell, communication is one, a process of transmitting thoughts, ideas, attitude, and feelings from one person to another. The second one is that the sharing and imparting information. The third one is the giving of understandable information and the receiving and understanding of the message. The receiving and understanding of the message is what we call feedback. Okay, so we call feedback, and that's what completes what, and that's what makes communication a two-way process. Okay, so the transmitting of message and the linking of people, that's another important point. The transmitting of messages and the linking of people. I don't know where you are currently, but for the fact that this what I'm doing is important to you, there's a link between the two of us. Okay, there's a link between the two of us, and that's all for this video. The next video is going to be the third session, which is the rules of communication, and I hope you enjoy what you've watched. See you in the next video.